Become an actor in a real thriller movie, struggling to survive in the virtual world. Entering this apartment is like stepping onto a path of no return. Only those selected by it can see it and enter it. And once chosen as a resident of an apartment, there is no more choice. In this apartment, once blood marks appear on the walls of the room, you must follow the instructions of the blood marks and go to the designated location to stay for that period of time within the specified date. Even if one can survive and return to the apartment, they will still face the next moment when blood marks appear on the walls. There is only one way to leave this apartment. Keywords of the novel. Hell's Apartments without pop-ups. Download the complete set of Hell's Apartments TXT, and read the latest chapters of Hell's Apartments. Chapter 1. Strange Apartments. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 1. Strange Apartments. Lee suddenly opened his eyes. His heart was burning with pain at this moment. Did you come again? Is it my turn this time? Lee sat up with support and turned on the bedside lamp. At this moment, the severe pain in the heart has finally slightly recovered. He got out of bed, put on his slippers, and then walked out of the bedroom to the living room outside, turning on the lights. He saw that thing. On the snow-white wall of the living room, at this moment, a line of words entirely composed of blood suddenly appeared. This extremely eerie scene, if an ordinary person sees it at this midnight moment, they will be scared out of their wits. But Lee didn't react much. It's my turn again. He looked carefully at the line of words. From June 7 to July 7, 2010, I went to Axiu village on the outskirts of X City and lived there for the full month. After Lee finished reading this eerie blood character, it suddenly began to blur, and the blood began to disappear as if absorbed by the wall. Axiu village. Lee remembered this name. I still want to go back to sleep, but I can't fall asleep anymore. He simply turned on the lights in the living room, brewed a cup of tea, and started drinking. He doesn't have the habit of smoking, so he can only drink tea. Although coffee may have a better effect, Lee always feels that when savoring the fragrance of tea, it is easy to calm down. Looking at his face reflected in the tea, Lee clenched the teacup tightly. It has been almost a year since I moved into this apartment. Although a year may not seem long, Lee felt as if he had spent countless years. The next day, as the sun rose, Lee, who was lying in front of the living room dining table, woke up. He only wore a thin pajama and covered himself with a blanket. After sleeping like this, he didn't know if he would catch a cold. The teacup in front of the table has completely cooled down the remaining tea. He looked at the clock in the living room and it was already 6 o'clock in the morning. Lee rubbed her eyes and immediately went to wash and dress up. Then, she made herself breakfast, fried an egg, and added it to the sliced bread she bought yesterday. She spread some salad dressing on it, making it breakfast for today. Lee is actually very proficient in cooking, mainly living alone for a long time, so he must learn cooking skills. Over time, he surprisingly cooks well. Biting the homemade sandwich in his mouth and taking out the milk from the microwave, Lee opened the calendar and calculated the schedule for next month, which is June. He is an online novelist and is also very famous online. He has signed a contract with a novel website, so he only needs to focus on coding at home and collect royalties on weekdays. It's not a big problem, he said, biting the sandwich in his mouth. Just bring your laptop and update your novels on time in June. I just don't know what will happen then. Then, he put down his calendar, chewed on the bread and fried eggs in his mouth, and clenched his fists. Absolutely alive. Come back here alive. After putting on his clothes, he walked out of the room without locking it at all. He lives in room 404 on the 4th floor. A rather unlucky room number, but it was not chosen by Lee either. Come to the 1st floor of the apartment. There are no residents on the 1st floor, but it is a huge auditorium similar to a hotel. Sofas and tables and chairs are placed throughout the auditorium for people to rest. On one of the sofas, there were 3 people sitting. The 3 of them stood up when they saw Li Yin walking towards them. They are a tall, bespectacled young man in a suit, a handsome young man in a hat, and a cute and beautiful young girl in a green dress. Do you? Your walls all have that line of blood characters? Li Yin pondered for a moment and asked. The 3 of them all nodded in agreement. They are also residents of this apartment. I see, then at least 4 people will be with us this time. Li Yin breathed a sigh of relief and sat down together. The expressions of the 4 people were very solemn. Li Yin, the pretty girl in green, said with a worried expression, really? Is everything okay? This time, you want us to stay for a month. And it's still in a suburban village far from the city. Yes, said the young man in a suit wearing glasses. I have checked the map and found that the suburbs of X city are backed by mountains, very desolate and remote. Even the Hope Project has no connection with them, and they are completely backward mountainous villages. There are many rural areas in Country C. Li Yin remained calm. There are definitely many impoverished and backward villages that are completely disconnected from the city. Don't think too much about it, anyway, it's not the first time. But I'm still. The young man in the suit with glasses wanted to say something more, but the young man in the hat stopped him. The atmosphere fell silent again. After a long time, no one appeared again. It is estimated that only the 4 of them had blood marks on the walls of their home this time. It's almost 7 o'clock, Li Yin looked at his watch and said, you 3 should go to work first. I'll keep waiting here. If there are new members, I'll call you again. Li Yin's calmness and wisdom have always reassured them, so the 3 of them also got up and left the apartment. Just now, Li Yin had already used his phone to surf the internet, but he never found out about Yushui village. But since it's said to be in the suburbs of X city, it will always be found. If these clues alone cannot be found, the line of blood will indicate a more accurate address. On June 7th, they had to enter Yushui village. And never leave before July 7th. Absolutely not, time flies, and soon it's June 6th. At this moment, it is 2:30 p.m. On the steep mountain road, Li Yin followed the 3 people step by step. This mountain is called Heiwu Mountain, and after repeated verification, it has been confirmed that the Yushui village is located on the Shangxi side of this mountain. The mountains are treacherous, and transportation to the outside world is very inconvenient. The village is almost isolated from the world, living a self-sufficient life without even water and electricity, which can be said to be quite impoverished. The young man in a suit wearing glasses, named Qin Xiaotian, is a tabloid journalist who is not too tired because he often runs news outside. But the other 2, the young man Luo Hengyan wearing a hat and the pretty girl Yi Kersen in a green dress, were ordinary white-collar workers who usually sit in the office. They walked several kilometers of mountain roads, and their shoes were worn out. They all felt extremely tired. But no one dares to rest. It is necessary to arrive at Yushui village before dark as soon as possible. Li Yin, holding a compass and map in his hand, didn't look very tired. Li Yin, Luo Hengyan asked out of breath, still, how long will it take to arrive? My leg is almost broken. If you want to stop, just stop it, Li Yin said without even looking back at the compass. As long as you're not afraid of death, I don't mind leaving you. How? How could it be? Luo Hengyan was very clear about Li Yin's personality, but in fact, everyone is like this. People living in that apartment will eventually become indifferent to the lives of others. It only took Luo Hengyan 6 months to move into that apartment. Passing another hill, Li Yin's spirit lifted and he looked at the foot of the mountain, saying, "Look. It's here." That is indeed a very large village. Although it looks very dilapidated, the construction of the house is not as shabby as imagined. At first glance, there are hundreds of buildings on the spacious land, including 2-story buildings. Rows of rice fields are planted between the buildings, and many people are working hard to cultivate them. At this point, the problem is not much. Next, all four of them excitedly rushed down the mountain. If you enter Yushui village, then it is equivalent to completing the instructions of the blood character. No one can disobey the instructions of that blood character. Walking to the foot of the mountain, Li Yin suddenly noticed a beautiful rural girl carrying 2 buckets of water passing by, so she immediately stopped her. This girl. Li Yin walked up and asked, "Is this Yushui village, right?" That rural girl looks about 17 or 18 years old, with big and charming eyes. "Yes, that's right. You." The rural girl looked at Li Yin and asked in confusion, "Excuse me. Are you?" "We came from K City for tourism, walked a long mountain road, and wanted to rest in the village." The girl immediately exclaimed excitedly, "It's really rare that someone from the city will come. My name is Axiu, come with me, and I'll take you to Uncle Wang's restaurant. Uncle Wang's vegetarian noodles are really delicious, all made with well water." "Well water? Is there really no tap water in this village? Moreover, when I looked over just now, I didn't actually notice any utility poles. It seems that this village is quite backward." The rural girl named Axiu was also very enthusiastic, so Li Yin and the others followed her. At this moment, Li Yin's gaze unintentionally shifted towards a bucket carrying behind Axiu. "The water in that bucket looks very clear, I don't know if it's from a well or a stream. But..." At this moment, Li Yin's body shook like an electric shock. At the bottom of the bucket, a woman's face that was incredibly pale with no pupils appeared. This face appears extremely abrupt, making it impossible for anyone to react. Li Yin took several steps back in an instant, his heart beating wildly. Then he walked over and looked at the bucket. It was still just an ordinary bucket of water, without any abnormalities. However, Li Yin was very clear that what he had just seen was not dazzling. "Ah! Miss Axiu." Li Yin forcibly suppressed his fear and said, "We still don't need to trouble you. You're quite busy carrying a bucket." Without waiting for Axiu to respond, he quickly turned his head and strode towards the 3 companions, giving them a glance. The 3 of them immediately understood and quickly followed Li Yin to leave Axiu. Axiu remained in place in a daze, not understanding where he had offended them. Walking in the village, their fresh faces caught the attention of many people. The people in the village looked at them in confusion. Heiwu Mountain is not a famous scenic spot, how could there be tourists coming? Yi Kursen asked Li Yin in a low voice, "Mr. Li Yin, just now. Did you already see that thing?" Li Yin Ma remained silent, only nodding as an answer. "Although I had known earlier that it was impossible to spend a month peacefully in Yushui village, I didn't expect that I had just stepped into this village in broad daylight." Li Yin looked up at the sky above, feeling as if the sun was gradually being obscured by clouds. This time. How many of them can survive until July 7th and return to the apartment in K City? It has been a year. Li Yin has experienced such things many times. He almost died several times. Almost died in the hands of those things. Where did those things come from and why they appeared? No one knows, but they are everywhere and can kill you anywhere and at any time. And in this world, the only place to avoid those things is in the apartment in K City. Only there can they absolutely ensure safety. This is the rule that cannot be violated after becoming a resident of that apartment. This is the second terrifying new work released by Huizhong since Strange Horror. Readers are kindly requested to support, recommend, and bookmark it. End of this chapter. Chapter 2. Entry. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 2 Entry. Everything started from that day a year ago. Looking back now, it feels like a nightmare. After graduating from university, Li Yin disregarded his parents' opposition and resolutely became an online novelist. Of course, it's definitely not because of any dreams, ideals or other reasons, it's purely because one can earn money in this industry. Writing online novels as a regular job is rare, and Li Yin is one of them. In fact, his remuneration income cannot be considered too high, so he can only barely make ends meet. Moreover, his new works may not necessarily continue to be popular in the future. In this era, there are many readers who are fond of the new and dislike the old, let alone fast food literature like online novels, which are just people's adjustment products. Li Yin was also very confused at one point. I always feel that the future of life is very directionless. Renting a house alone in K-City, I open my computer and upload QR codes every day as soon as I wake up. My daily shopping is mostly done through the internet, making me feel like an otaku. Most of the novels he writes are about war, although he himself is not very familiar with war. And his novels are also declining in popularity online. This month, the number of people subscribing to novel chapters is decreasing, with a monthly income of less than 800 yuan. Not to mention daily life, even rent is going to be a problem. I always feel that life has come to a very difficult path. That day Li Yin is strolling along a commercial street in K-City. At this time, he usually updates his novels at home, but now he is considering his future life. I am still too naive after all. Although I anticipated this day early, I believe that as long as I have some savings after a period of time, I can invest and speculate in stocks, and maybe even start my own business in the future. However, the fact is not so simple at all. Looking for a job. He doesn't have any work experience. What company doesn't value experience now? College students who have just entered society are as numerous as a cow's hair, and they will not be given special attention at all. Pinching a job search magazine in her hand, Li Yin's brow furrowed tighter and tighter. As he walked, he had unknowingly entered a community and entered an alley. Let's go find a job first. Li Yin sure couldn't go back home and beg his parents. Even if he had to work hard, he had to get through the difficulties first. After all, if the rent for this month is delayed again, the landlord will have to evict themselves. When I moved out of my home for a solo, it was also because I didn't align with my parents' beliefs. I wanted to one day achieve something and then go back home. But now, it has become like this. As he walked, he suddenly felt a chill coming from his back. He took away the job search magazine that lay horizontally in front of him, and under the sun, his own shadow reflected on the ground but still holding the job search weakly in front of me. Then, only his shadow was visible, and an even more terrifying change occurred. Li Yin, even though he's not moving now, the shadow under his feet is starting to move. Shadow, detached from Li Yin's feet, moved towards the corner of the alley in front of him on the ground. Li Yin was immediately stunned on the spot, and it took a few seconds to react. He has no shadow at this moment. Regardless of everything, his mind was blank at the time. He just ran away, following the direction of the shadow's escape. In these winding alleys, the shadow moved very fast, and Li Yin also spent a lot of effort to catch up with it. Finally, passing through another alley, Li Yin saw a shadow enter a very open space. In the center of this open space, there is a very tall apartment. That apartment, roughly speaking, should not be lower than 20 floors. The apartment also covers a large area, about 200 square meters, with white walls and neat rows of balconies on the outer floor. And this apartment has an extremely eerie place. It's noon now, and the sun is shining directly down. And this huge apartment. On the ground, surprisingly, there is no shadow. How could it be? Li Yin rubbed his eyes desperately, strongly suspecting that he was dreaming. But the scene before us is an undeniable fact. At the entrance of the apartment on the first floor, there is a revolving door. And his own shadow, on the ground, moved to the revolving door and automatically penetrated on the ground. At this moment, many ghost stories I heard as a child were all revived in Li Yin's mind. He was only 30 meters away from this apartment at this moment, and the seemingly ordinary apartment seemed like a monster about to devour people, ready to devour him at any moment. But, for some reason, he still walked towards this apartment. As if something is calling itself. Walking to the revolving door, Lee reached out his hand, pushed the revolving door, and walked in. And what catches the eye is a spacious lobby. The ground is smooth marble, with crystal chandeliers hanging from the ceiling. On the left side of the lobby, you can see the stairs, while on the right side, there are 3 elevators. I saw his shadow floating on the ground in front of an elevator, and then the elevator door opened. After the shadow drifted in, the elevator door closed. Lee immediately rushed to the elevator door and nervously looked at the floor sign. The elevator has stopped on the 4th floor. Lee quickly ran to another elevator, pressed the button, and the elevator door slowly opened. He then rushed in with one swift step and pressed the button on the 4th floor. As the number of floors increased, Lee heart was also suspended. My shadow. My shadow. Lee strongly felt in his heart that if he lost his shadow, it would mean something terrible. Finally, when he reached the 4th floor and the elevator door opened, he immediately walked out and stood on a long corridor. On that long corridor, there was also plenty of light, but as we walked forward, there was a deeper feeling. On both sides of the corridor, there are doors. The door is marked with the house number, 411, 410, 412, and so on, and when Lee walked to the door of room 404, suddenly, his shadow drifted out from the crack in the door and returned to Lee feet. However, the shadow still did actions that Lee had not done. On the right hand of the shadow, it seems to be holding on to something, but it cannot be seen clearly. Immediately, Shadow stuffed that thing into Shadow's pants pocket. After completing this action, its hands hung down and remained motionless. Lee tentatively waved his right arm, and to his surprise, the shadow also followed suit in waving its right hand. Shadow has returned to its original position. At this moment, he put his right hand into the pocket of the pants where the shadow had just placed things, and touched something hard. That is a key. The key also looks very ordinary, but it is engraved with the number, 404. Lee looked at the door of room 404 next to him, trembling. He inserted the key into the lock hole, gently turned it, and the door opened. He walked into room 404. At the entrance, there is a quite large living room with a coffee table, sofa, wardrobe, TV, and even the TV comes with karaoke and stereo, which seems to be a quite expensive one on the market. Next to the TV, there is a row of French window, with a balcony outside. After careful examination, there are also 2 bedrooms, a study, a bathroom, and a kitchen. And the room decoration is very good, the furniture is very new, and most of them are branded goods. The room is approximately 70.80 square meters, and given the current housing prices, even if it is a second-hand house, it is definitely not much cheaper. At least, with my current income, I am simply out of reach for such a house. What exactly is going on here? Are you, the new resident? Upon hearing this sound, Lee immediately turned around and saw a pretty girl wearing a green dress. Who are you? Who are you? Lee asked with great caution. Don't be afraid, the girl quickly waved her hand and said, I, like you, are all shadows that suddenly and automatically run into this apartment, and then become the residents of this apartment. Have you also obtained the key? Lee was startled, then took the key and strode towards the girl, asking, what's going on? This apartment, exactly. Since you are a new resident, according to convention, I will take you to meet our building manager. He was unanimously recommended by us, and once you meet him, he will inform you of the situation and then register your arrival. Building length. This apartment currently houses a total of 39 people, plus you, it's 40 people. All of us are forcibly bound by this apartment and have to stay here forever. Liin suddenly became furious and said, "Are you joking? How could I possibly live in this damn place?" The girl smiled bitterly and said, "There's nothing we can do. I was also very scared when I first entered this apartment, but there's really nothing we can do. Once our shadow enters this apartment and is given that key, it means we become residents of the apartment, so we can't escape this apartment." Speaking of which, the girl also had a painful expression on her face. No, can't escape. Liin felt the situation becoming increasingly eerie at the moment and asked, "Why can't we escape?" In the past, there were also people who were selected as residents but did not live in apartments. Such people would be killed by their own shadows. What? What? Liin was immediately stunned. Are you joking? Didn't you see it? The shadow has already been completely manipulated and controlled by this apartment. Normally, the shadow can be controlled by yourself at will, but if you do something against the rules, the shadow will manipulate your own body to commit suicide. I have been living in this apartment for 2 years. I have seen many people who commit suicide by being manipulated by the shadow because they violate the rules of the apartment. People are actually manipulated by shadows in the opposite direction. Such absurd words, but Liin couldn't refute them. Because he just witnessed the abnormal changes in his own shadow with his own eyes. Liin began to feel that this apartment was completely beyond his common sense. Who built this? This apartment. After all, why did you choose us as residents? The girl shook her head and said, "I don't know. I've thought about it many times in the past 2 years, but I can't understand it. I really can't understand it. This apartment itself is incomprehensible. However, only one thing is certain. We can't see the people who built this apartment, and for those who are not residents, apartments don't exist in this world." "What do you mean by you? Did you come here through an alley?" "Yes. Yes. Actually, that's just a dead end. Only those who have been selected as residents can enter this apartment through that alley. The vacant land occupied by the apartment also doesn't exist at all. It's a non-existent land. No, doesn't exist." Liin looked at the balcony outside the landing window. Outside, rows of tall buildings were visible. "We can see the outside world, but the outside world cannot see us." The girl saw Liin's confusion and explained to him, "When you leave the apartment and walk out of that alley, you will not be able to see the apartment at all. People who are not residents have no idea that this apartment exists in this world. But this apartment does exist. And once you enter, it's like stepping onto an extremely dangerous and terrifying path of no return." End of this chapter. Chapter 3. Rules of Blood Characters. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 3 Rules of Blood Characters. The history of this apartment is said to be difficult to calculate. And there are also quite a few people who have lived in this apartment. For decades, residents have developed a tacit understanding and experience, understanding what to do and what not to do. How to do things that are beneficial to oneself and how to do things that are unfavorable to oneself. So, whenever a new resident moves in, an old resident will come to tell him detailed precautions. If you don't explain it clearly, you may violate taboos and die without a place to bury yourself. And there are 2 basic rules. And once you become a resident of an apartment, these 2 rules must be followed no matter what. Firstly, and most fundamentally, except for situations indicated by the blood letter that require going out, it is absolutely not allowed to leave the apartment continuously for more than 48 hours. Once this rule is violated, one will die. Secondly, after becoming a resident, if the blood characters appear on the walls of the room where one lives, they must absolutely follow the instructions of the blood characters. If there is a slight violation, they will also die. Lee has personally seen residents who do not believe in these two rules and ignore the instructions in blood letters, leaving the apartment. And those residents all died mysteriously afterwards. Without exception. Yi Kersen is a resident of room 403, so she is Li Yin's next-door neighbor. Luo Hengyan, on the other hand, is a resident of room 507. He has been living there for half a year and has survived 2 blood instructions. Qin Xiaotian, on the other hand, has been living there for over 9 months and has executed 3 blood instructions. The blood character indication usually refers to specifying a specific location to perform certain behaviors, and during this period, many bizarre phenomena will inevitably occur. Often, they die before they realize it. Even when he died, he couldn't realize he was already dead. It sounds quite incredible, even unimaginable, but it is an undeniable fact. At that time, it took Li Yin a long time to fully accept all of this. After all, everything that came suddenly was too unrealistic. However, at that time, he didn't have the courage to leave the apartment for more than 48 hours. After all, that kind of behavior is no different from suicide. In the end, he borrowed some money from the other residents of the apartment, paid off the rent, and moved into the apartment. The residents in the apartment are basically the same as him, because the shadow automatically enters the apartment and enters during the process of chasing the shadow. The person who has lived in this apartment for the longest time is Lu Chang, Xia Yuan. Xia Yuan is a young man wearing glasses who looks very refined. And he has been living in this apartment for over 5 years. He told all the residents that the only way to survive in this apartment is to be able to escape back to the apartment in a timely manner after the designated time. No matter what exists in the designated location and what kind of curse one suffers, once they escape back to the apartment, they can completely escape all danger. After entering the apartment, there is no need to worry about getting hurt before leaving. Until the next appearance of the blood character. Over the past year, Li Yin has witnessed firsthand the fate of those who were chosen as residents but did not live in apartments because they did not believe their words. He once went to persuade those people to move into the apartment immediately, but they all looked down upon him. As a result, after more than 48 hours, Li Yin witnessed their shadows changing one by one, either manipulating them to jump off buildings or committing suicide with knives. The most tragic person was manipulated by the shadows and ran to an intersection, where he was run over and killed by a truck on the spot, turning into a ball of flesh and mud. After seeing that scene, Li Yin felt nauseous when he saw the meat for a whole 3 months. The blood indication is generally from easy to difficult. The first blood indication has the lowest risk and a considerable chance of survival. However, starting from the second indication, the risk and eerie level will gradually increase. Then, the third. Fourth indication requires putting in all your strength to survive. The interval of blood instructions is generally measured in months. Based on the experience of elderly residents, there has never been a precedent where blood instructions have not been issued throughout the entire apartment for more than 6 months. When there is a blood sign in the room, the heart will feel a burning sensation, so even if you are not in the room, you will immediately realize that there is blood in your room. Once you finish reading and remembering the blood characters, they will disappear. The blood symbol never indicates behaviors that they cannot achieve, such as calling them to go to the moon, which is not possible and can be achieved physically. Finally, based on the decades of experience of the elderly residents, a conclusion has been drawn. That is, there is only one way to leave this apartment. That is, if you complete 10 consecutive health instructions and still live, you can gain freedom and move out of the apartment without worrying about death. Of course, the word continuous is simply unnecessary because the standard for completion is only to be able to return to the apartment alive. If one dies, they will naturally not be able to complete the next blood instruction. In this way, the room where the person resides will become an unowned room, and only when new residents move in will new blood instructions be generated. So far, he has also executed the blood character instruction 3 times, and the last time he executed the blood character instruction, it can be almost said to be a near death. The instructions are very simple. Go to the 5th floor of an abandoned school and wait until midnight that night to complete the instructions. At that time, there were a total of 6 people, including him, who received the same blood instructions as him. And at midnight that night, everyone spread their legs and wanted to escape from school. However, no matter where they go, they will find it a dead end. And next, during their escape, they also discovered that their otherwise good companions suddenly turned into a bloody corpse. Finally, Lee-een gritted her teeth, jumped from the window to a tree, climbed down again, and then sat in the car of one of her deceased companions, stepped on the maximum throttle and fled to the apartment. Although Lee-een had learned to drive, he did not have a driver's license. The car was quite new, and he had to sweat a lot before driving back to the community where his apartment was located. But just as he got off the car, he felt one hand grab his foot. And at that time, he fell to the ground and only saw a child wearing a school uniform with a pale face, his body pressed against the bottom of the car. And Lee-een made a decisive decision, pulling his feet out of the shoes. Then, run desperately into that alley. He goes to the gym almost every day to force himself to exercise his running speed in order to improve his running speed. Other residents also worked out with him, and in the end, almost everyone developed a speed comparable to that of a long-distance runner. But no matter how fast the speed is, the child behind him, who looks like a student, is still constantly approaching him. Every time Lee-een looks back, he will see he is getting closer to himself. What's scary is he's just walking very simply. No matter how he looks, it's impossible for him to catch up with his own speed. Finally, when he ran only 10 meters away from the apartment, he saw Xia Yuan and a group of residents waiting for him at the revolving door. Hurry up, Lee-een. At that time, Xia Yuan, who always looked gentle and elegant, desperately shouted at his throat, "There are 10 meters more, you will be safe. Hurry up." As Xia Yuan later said, they saw that the ghost was less than 2 meters away from Lee-een. And for the last 10 meters, Lee-een rushed over desperately, while at the same time, the ghost had already reduced the distance difference to 0 and was about to open its arms to embrace Lee-een. However, Xia Yuan and the others were unable to run out and save him. After all, leaving the apartment, there is no guarantee of life safety anymore. And in the last moment, Lee-een suddenly exploded in speed again, roared, rushed towards the revolving door, and suddenly pushed in. And during this process, the ghost child had already touched his waist on both sides. After Lee-een entered the apartment, the ghost was at a loss. After standing at the door for a long time, my body turned into light smoke and slowly disappeared. Afterwards, Lee-een lifted his shirt and was horrified to find that on both sides of his waist, there were actually small black handprints left on each side. That fingerprint disappeared completely and became invisible after a long period of time. And 2 months after that incident, it is now this instruction. For myself, this is the 4th time I have executed the blood word instruction. Absolutely. The danger has escalated to an extremely high level. This village is much larger than expected. However, as expected, there were no hotels available for people to live in. This is also a very natural thing. Of course, according to the instructions of the blood character, it is necessary to live here. Leaving the scope of Yushui village is considered a violation of the blood character instruction. This village is surrounded by mountains and the surrounding terrain is steep. There is a long river passing through the village, which becomes the best guarantee of water source. With this water source, crops can be irrigated, and the people in the village can live a self-sufficient life in the mountains. Most of the crops grown in the fields are rice. Even some children under 10 years old are helping to plant rice seedlings barefoot in the rice fields, with their faces covered in soil and water. After walking for a while, a middle-aged man finally walked up and asked, "How many gentlemen are you from the city?" The children also looked at Li Yin and the others curiously. After all, it was rare to see a city resident in this big mountain. Many of them have never seen anything like electric lights or televisions. And Li Yin vaguely felt that the middle-aged man's tone seemed to contain some hostility. If you are the reporters who are going to cover that matter, leave me immediately. The middle-aged man said here, his eyes wide open. It's been so many years, and you're still clinging and refusing to let go. Li Yinshin suddenly thought, what happened? Is it possible? What is the connection with this blood character indication? He quickly waved his hands and said, no, sir, you misunderstood. We are just ordinary tourists who want to borrow a place in your village. Don't worry, we will pay. This year, there are indeed some senior hikers who do not follow the travel routes of travel agencies for self-guided tours and enter some wilderness areas. However, this Heiwu mountain itself is not a tourist attraction and usually does not attract tourists. The middle-aged man obviously didn't believe Li Yin's words. Nonsense. You better leave me quickly. Don't think I don't know your intentions. The middle-aged man became increasingly excited, but Li Yin knew very well. He could never leave this village. According to the blood instructions, he must stay in this village for a month, otherwise he will die. The instructions of the blood character must be strictly followed, and Li Yin has deeply engraved this point in his heart. What's so noisy about? An elderly voice sounded, and then people pushed away one after another. An elderly man with gray hair was supported by a young woman in her 20s and slowly walked over. Village Chief. Village Chief, they are from the city and must have come for Li Bing's incident. Yes. It must be like that. The old man appears to be over 80 years old. He walked trembling towards Li Yin and the others, saying, young people. What are you all here for? Li Yin quickly approached and bowed, saying, hello, old village chief. We are purely entering the mountains to experience the rural customs, which is why we want to live in this village. Don't worry, we won't live in vain. Oh. Experience the rural style. It's quite interesting, isn't it? The old village chief seemed to be thinking about something, and then said, okay, you guys, just stay at my house. Li Yin was taken aback. The village chief surprisingly agreed so readily. Village chief, how could you let these people of unknown origin come to your house? The middle-aged man immediately said, they must be journalists. It doesn't matter, said the old village chief with great magnanimity, Yushui village hasn't had any guests for a long time. It's rare to have guests, how can we not entertain them well? The words of the old village chief made Li Yin suspect that the village chief had ulterior motives. But as long as you can stay, don't worry about anything else. To be honest, considering the issue of running away when leaving on the 7th of next month, Li Yin still has a headache. In terms of the mountain terrain, driving is slower than walking, so one can only escape on foot. But with such a steep mountain terrain, if pursued, how many of the 4 of them could survive? Last time, among the 6 residents, only Li Yin survived. So, Li Yin decided to figure out what the true face of the evil forces that exist in this secluded water village was, and perhaps find a solution. End of this chapter. Chapter 4. Water. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 4. Water. Li Yin still remembers that before setting off, Xia Yuan gave him a piece of advice. At the beginning of the 4th blood symbol, danger often lies invisibly. To survive, one must observe and be cautious, and find a certain pattern. Even the smallest and most unnatural things cannot be let go. It has been a long time since anyone could survive the 3rd blood symbol, so I hope you can survive. And one thing he particularly emphasizes is that, never believe what anyone says, even yourself. Because your eyes will deceive you. Perhaps you are walking on a cliff, but you will feel like you are actually on a flat ground. Li Yin remembered these words and dared not relax for a moment. And the village chief's invitation this time is a great unnatural. I am the village chief, surnamed Zhang. The old village chief was supported by the young woman and led Li Yin and the other four towards his own house. Zhang village chief, Yi Kursen first raised a question, why? Are you willing to let us stay? Huh, the village chief gave a mysterious smile and said, I'm different from those uncivilized antiques. Yushui village cannot always develop in this big mountain. Don't be nervous. You can stay as long as you want. The young woman who was supporting him quickly said, Grandpa, is this really good? Tomorrow, it's just the right time. It's Bing Heir's anniversary at this time. Bing Heir's Memorial Day. Li Yin's heart pounded. Tomorrow is the day when I officially start living in Yushui village according to the blood instructions of the apartment. And is that Bing the Li Bing mentioned earlier? It happens to be the anniversary of the festival. If it's a coincidence, he wouldn't believe killing him. The village chief's house is quite imposing, with a hint of a small Western-style building. It is 3 stories high and has reinforced concrete exterior floors, unlike most other houses which are made of ordinary cement. After all, it was not a polite time, so Li Yin and the others entered the village chief's house. Of course, the village chief was also very cautious and took them to his room. After sitting down, he asked his granddaughter to leave first, closed the door, and then asked, so, can you tell me your names? After all, they are people of unknown origin, and the village chief also needs to figure it out. Li Yin replied, my name is Li Yin, and this is Qin Xiaotian, Luo Hengyan, Yi Kursen. At that moment, the door suddenly opened and a young man with a flat head walked in. He coldly scanned Li Yin and the others and said to the village chief, Grandpa. Indeed, I heard from the villagers that you brought a group of people from unknown backgrounds to live in. Is that true? Ah Wu. Why are you so impolite? Zhang village chief immediately angrily said, who should I invite? Do I need your approval? The young man named O refused to give in and said, Grandpa, who do you want to invite to be free? But I can't stand these unscrupulous people coming to the village. Suddenly, Luo Hengyan, who was impatient, became angry and stood up immediately, saying, You, who are you talking about? Li Yin immediately stood up and whispered, Did you make a mistake? Is it time to worry about this kind of thing now? Then, with a smirk on his face, he said, Sir, we are experiencing the rural customs and there is absolutely no malice. If we stay for a month, we will leave. A month. The young man named O was furious and said, Do you still want to stay for so long? Get out of here. I'll tell you, what kind of haunting is all said by people with a guilty heart. That Li Bing committed suicide, and the police station has closed the case. Some people are using ghosts and gods to catch the wind. Suicide. This surprised Li Yin a bit. However, this still makes people feel nervous. Everyone has read ghost stories, and it is also a common trick for suicide victims to become ghosts. Ah Wu's angry eyes met, but it made Li Yin even more certain that being haunted was not just a trap. Alright, Ah Wu. Zhang, the village chief, slammed his cane heavily on the ground and said, You go back to my room. Mr. Li and his team are my guests, how can you be rude to them? Humph. Ah Wu ignored him completely and said, Grandpa, do you really let them stay for a month? Do you know their background? Zhang, the village chief, waved his cane and headed towards Ah Wu. The latter caught off guard and gave a heavy tap on the shoulder. Go back to my room. Zhang, the village chief, got angry and suddenly started coughing again. Li Yin was very puzzled. Beat your own grandson for a few strangers. What kind of calculation is this village chief using? The degree of unnatural is becoming stronger and stronger. Ah Wu glared angrily at Li Yin and the others, saying, When are you so proud? Then he rushed out of the room and ended up colliding with a middle-aged woman full of pride. Ah Wu. What are you doing? The middle-aged woman covered her forehead and said, You're running around so recklessly. Mom, go ask Grandpa yourself. Then Ah Wu rushed out, and the middle-aged woman immediately chased after him. Let everyone laugh. Zhang, the village chief, immediately closed the door and said, Don't worry about anything, just stay here, stay here. Li Yin felt that there seemed to be some intention behind village chief Zhang's invitation for them to come. What is it? There are a total of 4 people living in Zhang village chief's family, including him, his daughter Zhang Yinglan, the middle-aged woman just now, as well as his grandson Zhang Honggu and granddaughter Zhang Suyue, which are the young girls. And the village chief's son-in-law passed away 3 years ago. In the atmosphere of Ah Wu, Li Yin believed that it was not appropriate for everyone to dine together, so he suggested that they start a small stove for dinner and not bother the village chief. Anyway, just in case, I also brought a large amount of food. To Li Yin's surprise, the village chief did not insist. Upon hearing what he said, he agreed. It's late at night. The turbulent water flowed down the waterfall, while Axiu flowed towards the waterfall. Sister Binger. At this moment, her face was covered in tears. At the same time, near the village chief's house, there lived the middle-aged man who had troubled Li Yin and his companions in the morning. His name is Yan Haotian, and he is a very generous and reputable person in the village. At present, I am still living alone as a single person. What is the village chief thinking? At this point it was almost midnight, but Yan Haotian still struggled to fall asleep. In theory, it was almost summer, but he felt cold all over, so he covered himself with an extra blanket. But even so, I still feel shivering and trembling. Suddenly, he felt damp inside the blanket. At first, I didn't pay much attention, but later on, I felt like the entire blanket was submerged in water. Yan Haotian immediately sat up and lifted the blanket. The whole bed was completely soaked in water for some time. He immediately sat up, and when his feet touched the floor, he was also immersed in water. What's going on? He began to doubt and waver. The room was very dark, and due to the lack of electric lights, he couldn't discern the direction at all and could only grope forward. Because I have lived here for a long time and am already very familiar with it, I did not bump into the furniture. I groped for the drawer and found that it was also covered in water. Open the drawer and take out the kerosene lamp and a box of matches. After lighting the lamp, he felt a little relieved. At this moment, it is already past midnight. Time has entered June 7th. Yan Haotian walked out of the bedroom and looked outside, only to find that the water on the ground was quite severe. Is it raining heavily? But outside the window, there is clearly a bright moon in the sky, where is there any sign of rainfall? Soon he felt that water was dripping from the ceiling. Yan Haotian raised the kerosene lamp and saw that there was indeed water on the ceiling. But when he saw that scene, he was immediately scared out of his wits. How could it be? On the snow-white ceiling, surprisingly, rows of footprints were left. Footprints made of water. The footprints clearly show 5 toes. Is it possible for a person to walk upside down from the ceiling? Yan Haotian calmed down and bit his lips tightly, watching the footprints on the ceiling extend into the kitchen. Although he was very scared, Yan Haotian still wanted to go and see. Perhaps we can find some explanation to understand this strange phenomenon. He trembled and gradually walked towards the kitchen. The kitchen is not very large, it can be easily seen and there is no place to hide people. Besides that big cupboard. And the footprints on the ceiling actually extended to the top of the cupboard, and then moved to the wall next to the cupboard. No, it's impossible. Yan Haotian held the kerosene lamp high and slowly walked towards the cupboard. Every step is like walking on thin ice. When he finally walked to the cupboard, he grabbed the door with his left hand and took a deep breath. No way. It has nothing to do with me. Li Bing, you committed suicide, I didn't harm you, don't come to me. Then, he suddenly opened the door of the cupboard completely. Under the reflection of the kerosene lamp, what caught his eye was, bowls and spoons arranged neatly. Everything is normal. Call out. At this moment, Yan Haotian felt like his whole body was about to collapse, but he finally relaxed. Sure enough, I scared myself. But what's the matter with the footprints on the ceiling? Who is this prank? But no one in the village has ever had a holiday with him. Also, can the water stains on those footprints alone accumulate so much water? It's better to scoop out all the water first, otherwise you won't be able to sleep at all. So he closed the door of the cupboard and decided to use the basin to scoop water first. Just as the door to the cupboard was about to close, a colorless hand extended from the cupboard and pushed the door against it. Before Yan Haotian could react, another hand reached out and grabbed his neck. Immediately, the door to the cupboard opened, and Yan Haotian's body was pulled into the cupboard. The door of the cupboard slammed shut for a long time without any response. And those accumulated water, as if absorbed, seeped into the ground and disappeared. A gust of wind blew, and the cupboard door was blown open again. Inside, there were still only neatly arranged bowls and spoons. End of this chapter. Chapter 5. Axiu. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 5. Axiu. Li Yin looked at the bright moon outside the window, and as the hands of his watch crossed midnight, it meant that they were already bound in this village. Only 1 month later, at midnight on July 8, can I leave here? A month. It's really rare. In terms of the usual blood command. He still remembers clearly the scene of Yi Kersen taking himself to meet Xia Yuan for the first time. Xia Yuan, who lived in room 1006, gave Li Yin the first impression at that time. Wouldn't he? He is the person who lived in this terrifying place for 4 years, Xia Yuan lived there for 4 years a year ago, is it true or false? Wearing a pair of frameless glasses, wearing a straight and hot-fitting suit, with a slender figure and a refined and kind face, it looks. It can never be equated with the building chief in Li Yin's mind. Are you a new resident? At that time, Xia Yuan easily accepted him, as if he had become accustomed to it. Yes, Mr. Xia, I. Don't say anything. Xia Yuan immediately asked him to sit down in the room and then said to Yi Kersen, go and inform everyone about the new arrival. At that time, Kersen looked at Xia Yuan and couldn't help but feel like a ripe apple, afraid to look at him directly. Then, shyly nodding, he walked out. Xia Yuan's room is about the same size as Li Yin's. However, by comparison, the decoration is more simple. Don't be too nervous, Xia Yuan said with a smile. People who enter this apartment for the first time will be at a loss, and when I tell them the truth, they will feel a sense of worldview collapse, which is difficult to accept and believe. Until now, I feel like everything is shrouded in mist. Li Yin supported his forehead and said, Mr. Xia. Do I really want to stay here forever? Do you want coffee or tea? Xia Yuan didn't answer directly, but took out a ceramic cup from the cabinet and said, I have Yuqian Longjing from Hangzhou. As for coffee, it's also imported coffee from Colombia and Brazil, which my parents sent to me overseas. Coffee. I've always felt that this kind of thing is no different from traditional Chinese medicine, Li Yin said with a bitter smile. Well, the tea is ready, by the way, don't add goji berries. Okay. Do you want to add some chrysanthemums? Sure. Xia Yuan looks only 20.4 or 5 years old, slightly older than Li Yin, but he is very experienced in his actions. After brewing tea, he kindly handed it to Li Yin and then said, believe what I say next as much as possible. I can assure you that I will never lie. However, I have no definite guarantee of how much you can accept. I understand. Then, Xia Yuan told Li Yin everything. When everything was said, Li Yin's expression was already so shocked that it was beyond measure. He really can't accept such a strange statement. But this is true again. He had already tried walking outside the alley to see this place, and indeed, the apartment disappeared without a trace. Here, it is indeed an incomprehensible abnormal building. I understand your current mood, but I have to tell you, leaving this apartment for more than 48 hours will result in death. If you don't believe it, I can show you some videos. In order to make people believe this, I used to. I believe it. Lee easily accepted this point and continued, so you all met at the locations indicated by the blood letters. Met. Yes, Xia Yuan said, his face turning a bit pale. Unfortunately, I haven't been an atheist since I entered this apartment. The existence of idealism. Li Yin's hands began to tremble uncontrollably at this moment. Xia Yuan pushed his glasses on the bridge of his nose and said, I can live to this day. Looking back, it's just a nightmare. Just looking back, I doubt how I managed to survive. At this moment, Li Yin raised a question. You just said. Generally, there are no blood letters in apartments with intervals exceeding 6 months. So, how long is it possible for blood letters to be separated for the same resident? It's hard to say, Xia Yuan continued. Initially it would be relatively fast, and there would be a new blood character appearing every few months. However, the further it goes, the longer the interval. I have completed 5 blood character instructions, and the last blood character instruction is almost a year away from now. So, doesn't it mean that without issuing instructions, we have to stay indefinitely? That's right. There's no way. The saying that I can leave after 10 bloody instructions was also told by the old residents when I first moved in. And those old residents also died later on. Li Yin is very clear. I'm afraid he will also have to live in this apartment for a long time in the future. Then, Xia Yuan took him to meet the neighbors in various apartments. There are several people who have left a deep impression on Li Yin, including Huo Yanqing and Yi, who live in room 706. They are both very young and seem to have just graduated from college. They moved into this apartment 1 year earlier than Li Yin and got along well with him. There are 2 more people, which also make it difficult for him to forget. One is Tang Wenshan, who lives in room 502, and the other is Katsuko Oda, who lives in room 402. Tang Wenshan was an extremely gloomy and reserved young man with extremely cold eyes. When he saw anyone, he looked like the other person and he were sworn enemies. However, Yukiko Oda is a college student who came from country R to study abroad in country C. She speaks very well in spoken English, while her expression is very calm and composed, making people feel that they cannot see through her. Another reason why Xingzi left a deep impression on Li Yin was that she was so beautiful that she amazed Li Yin and was a standard Gothic loli. After Li Yin started living in the apartment, he often met Yukiko Oda, who was his neighbor next door. Initially, he hoped to get along well with these experienced residents. Yi Kursen is very approachable, but Yukiko Oda always gives a feeling of being unattainable. When there is nothing wrong, she always holds a Japanese version of Genji Monogatari. Li Yin remembers that when he went out yesterday, he and Yi Kursen specifically went to say goodbye to Yukiko Oda's house. And she remained so cold, never saying a word from beginning to end. On the contrary, Huo Yanqing and his wife were very enthusiastic and repeatedly reminded them to be careful and to come back alive. This moved Li Yin very much, and over the course of a year, our relationship has also deepened. Everyone. After all, they all support each other and live to this day. Thinking of this, Li Yin felt mixed emotions and looked at Luo Hengyan and Qin Shaotian sleeping beside him. And Yi Kursen, who constantly struggles with the sleeping bug. Kursen, hold on. We must have 2 people awake to do it, Li Yin said. You can hold on a little longer. Here, have some more tea. I'm fine. Although she said so, she still yawned heavily. I can't fall asleep. So Li Yin had to talk to her more to make her concentrate better. Then, let's talk. Kursin, you. Like Xia Yuan, right? Ah, right. Ah, no, I'm not. Kursin quickly waved her hands and said, I'm not with Xia Yuan. Yi Kursin's ability to survive to this day is closely related to Xia Yuan's existence. 3 years have passed, and she has persevered until now. Xia Yuan, Yi Kursin's face turned red at this moment. He may not necessarily have a liking for me. Besides, now, the first thing to consider is survival. I can't even think of these things. Li Yin smiled and said, we can definitely leave that damn apartment alive together. Definitely. Upon hearing Li Yin's words, Yi Kursin felt a little relieved. Hun Yan has an impulsive personality, and I'm just worried about him. Li Yin turned to look at Luo Hunyan, who was sleeping soundly, and said, he's also quite pitiful. After his parents passed away, he came to K City to live alone. I didn't expect to encounter such a thing. Yeah. Yi Kursin nodded and said, and also Xiaotian. Divorced because of his wife's extramarital affair, wandering around alone and decadent in the late night, drinking and getting drunk, and his shadow was. Qin Xiaotian and Yi Kursin received the same blood instructions before, which only had 3 people. As a result, another person died, and only Qin Xiaotian and Yi Kursin survived. So, Yi Kursin also has a strong sense of companionship towards Qin Xiaotian and hopes that he can survive. The next day has finally arrived. So, Mr. Li and Miss Yi haven't woken up yet. Early in the morning, village chief Zhang came to greet them, while Luo Hunyan answered that Li Yin and Yi Kursin were very tired and still resting. It's okay, Zhang, the village chief, suddenly looked around and saw no one around. He asked Luo Hunyan in a low voice, Mr. Luo, there's no one else here. Just tell me. When will your boss come? Ah. Boss. Luo Hunyan was stunned and asked, what boss? Huh, still pretending. I know your boss has instructed you to pretend to be like that, it's okay. I've already been angry with the people in the village, and they wouldn't dare not look at my face. You can look around the village casually, I definitely have no objection. I don't understand. Right. If you don't understand, that's right. Don't worry, during your time living in the village, I will definitely treat you well. Has your boss already contacted me? Watching Zhang village chief's attentive appearance, Luo Hunyan began to realize that the village chief seemed to have misunderstood something. However, it seems that it was because of that boss that the village allowed them to stay, even resorting to violence against their own grandchildren, and being so enthusiastic towards them. So, let him continue to misunderstand. Grandpa. Zhang Suyue suddenly rushed over and said out of breath, Grandpa, something big happened. How, Uncle Haotian, he's gone. Haotian. Zhang, the village chief, frowned and immediately said to Luo Hunyan, Mr. Luo. I'll go handle some things first. Missing, for Luo Hunyan, who is extremely sensitive to everything, is a term that can easily evoke connections. Li Yin repeatedly warned him that any unnatural must be absolutely taken into account. Therefore, he immediately said, Village chief, let me go and see with you. In front of the turbulent waterfall, Axiu took off his shoes and socks, soaked his feet in water, and shook them. Axiu. She immediately turned around and saw that it was her next-door neighbor, Liang Renbin, who had grown up as a childhood sweetheart. Liang Renbin, who looks very handsome, has always been very close to Axiu. After the death of Axiu's parents, they explicitly expressed their desire for Axiu to marry Renbin. However, Axiu believed that his parents were filial and kept dragging on the wedding. After all, rural people have more conservative views than urban people. But after Li Bing's incident, Axiu also kept a respectful distance from Renbin. Today is Sister Binger's anniversary, Axiu turned her head and said, I will pay my respects to her. No matter how much the people in the village taboo her, I will never forget this day. Why bother? Axiu, for the sake of Li Bing, you have to keep going against me like this. She's already dead, what else can I do? I don't want to see you again, Axiu continued coldly. If you come over again, I won't be polite. Liang Renbin frowned and said, okay. Okay. Anyway, it's useless to say anything to you on this day. But, Axiu, you must remember that I am always sincere to you. After Renbin left, Axiu bent down and scooped up water to wash his face. And at that moment, she saw through her fingers. What was reflected on the water was not her face, but another woman. She slowly took her hand away, and on the water, her own face still reflected. Sister Binger. Axiu was not afraid at all, saying, I know you hate me. Even if it turns out like this, you are still my sister Binger. I won't be afraid of you, because I believe you will never harm me. Just go ahead and kill all the people who forced you to death. All of them. End of this chapter. Chapter 6. Feast, 1. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 6 Feast, 1, Where are the police in this small village? Something big happened, that is, the village chief is in charge, and who doesn't know who. Generally, theft and murder never occur, so Yan Haotian's disappearance has become a major event in this village. And Yan Haotian's disappearance also became a major event. The villagers even spontaneously organized to search for him in various nearby places. After all, Yan Haotian has good social connections and everyone doesn't want him to get into trouble. When he was discovered missing, there was also a commotion. This is Li Bing's revenge, it's her revenge. At that time, Luo Hengyan followed Zhang village chief and went to Yan Haotian's house to check. He also knew that Yan Haotian was the middle-aged man from yesterday. However, just as they walked out of Yan Haotian's house, a woman with slightly dark skin suddenly exclaimed the above sentence in terror. This is not the first time I have heard the name Li Bing. Luo Hengyan predicted that this time the blood character indication was mostly related to her. So without hesitation, he asked, what does that mean? Who is Li Bing? The dark-skinned woman looked around 20 years old and was very tall. Just as she was about to say something, a burly man behind her quickly stopped her from continuing and said, Ah Chin, don't talk nonsense. It's nothing. Everyone, don't mind. Who knows? Suddenly, a cold voice came, and Luo Hengyan immediately followed the sound. However, yesterday they met the girl Axiu carrying a bucket. Axiu, you, the burly man quickly said, you, what are you talking about? Over the years, strange things have happened in the village more than once, haven't they? Huh, you all have a guilty conscience and dare not say anything more, but I know very well. This is Sister Binger's curse on you. At this moment, most of the people in the village gathered here. Everyone looked at Axiu's gaze and dared not speak for a moment. Everyone looked frightened and quite uneasy. Luo Hengyan began to feel that there was indeed a considerable mystery involved. Although there is a rumor of being haunted, the specifics are still unclear. Sure enough. Is it the one named Li Bing who keeps his vengeful spirit? Humph. Axiu, don't deceive others with lies. At this moment, a short-haired girl wearing glasses and a chubby man walked out. The chubby man stared at her fiercely and said, don't forget, Li Bing committed suicide. It's none of our business. Suicide. Song Tian, you really mean it? How did you treat Sister Binger back then? Axiu stared at him fiercely and said, Sister Binger grew up with us, but after that incident, all of you treated her like a plague god, mocked her, and even threw stones at her. I have seen it with my own eyes several times. You. Song Tian, the chubby man, was snatched away by her and said, so what? She's a wild seed her mother stole from a man. We keep this wild seed in the village, which is already a great favor to her. What does she have the right to dislike? Dare you say those two words again? At this moment, Xiu was furious and even wanted to rush over. However, the short-haired woman with eyes beside Song Tian was faster. With one swift step, she slapped her in the face. Do you have the guts to try him out? The man who hit me in front of me, do you think I don't exist? You. Gu Ling. Xiu was a bit shocked for a moment. She covered her beaten face and looked at her fierce expression. Suddenly, she bumped into the short-haired glasses girl and grabbed her hair tightly, shouting, "You're also an accomplice. You also have a share in Bing Er's death. I won't let you go either." Although everyone approached to pull Xiu apart, her strength was too strong, causing the short-haired and bespectacled woman's hair to become messy. She even went to scratch her face, which surprised Luo Hengyan beside her. Yesterday, my first impression of this girl was a quiet and simple rural girl, but I didn't expect it to be so spicy. Could it be that even rural areas have begun to be plagued by non-mainstream influences these days? However, I have finally gained a basic understanding of the background of the Li Bing incident. That is to say, she grew up with the younger generation in the village and has the best relationship with this Xiu. Later on, it was discovered that she was actually born out of an affair with her mother. For rural people with conservative beliefs, they naturally couldn't stand her. She was probably subjected to a great insult and couldn't bear it, so she chose suicide. But even if her soul really lingers, she and Li Yin and the others, rather than having no grievances or grudges at all, have no reason to harm them. However, it is impossible for them to go to a place without danger in that apartment. Since they are required to stay for a month, nothing can happen during that month. Later, I asked the village chief and he gained a more detailed understanding. Li Bing's parents are both from her own village. She grew up with the children in the village and has always had a good relationship with them. Her personality is very lively and outgoing. Among them, Xiu and her feelings are the best, and there is almost no difference between Xiu and her sisters. Among the young people, the ones closest in age to Li Bing are Hong Wu, Su Yu, Yang Renbin from the village head's family, Song Tian, Gu Ling and his wife just now, as well as the dark-skinned Iron Qin. The man of all ages is her father Tai Mu, who is a stonemason in the village. One night 5 years ago, Li Bing's mother accidentally spilled the beans because she had drunk too much. It turned out that Li Bing was born through adultery with a stranger who had come to the village before. She carefully calculated that the child should belong to that outsider. This incident made Li Bing's father furious and almost killed his wife. Later, he left the village in a fit of anger and said he wanted to find the adulterer, but he has not returned yet. And Li Bing's mother and daughter naturally suffered greatly in the village. As a result, Li Bing's mother died of illness in a state of melancholy. At that time, only Xiu helped Li Bing arrange her mother's funeral. The days ahead were indeed like hell for Li Bing. The people in the village looked at her as if they were looking at garbage. Everyone felt that she was very dirty, and whenever they saw her, they either avoided her or insulted her. In the end, these days lasted for about a year, and one day, Li Bing jumped into the waterfall and committed suicide. Xiu cried for several days as a result, and in the end, she even held a funeral for Li Bing alone. After returning to the village chief's house, Luo Hengyan told Li Yin and Qin Shaotian, who had just woken up, what he had seen and heard. Li Yin first confirmed that the door was tightly closed, then lowered his voice and said to Luo Hengyan and Qin Shaotian, "I understand the general situation. We can't stay here anymore." Before Luo Hengyan could react, Qin Shaotian had already understood. Zhang Hongwu and Zhang Suyue, as well as their mother Zhang Yinglan, were they all cold talking to Li Bing back then, right? Yes. Well, in that case, if Li Bing really turns into a vengeful soul to seek revenge, then there are 3 people in this family who may be her revenge targets. Aren't we affected by staying here? Li Yin's words do make sense. But where to live? Axiu. Li Yin said without hesitation, Axiu's home, I think, is the safest because logically speaking, Li Bing is completely impossible to seek revenge against her. Ah. Luo Hengyan was stunned and then said, but her parents have both passed away and she lives alone. The three of us, big men, live in here. At the critical moment of life and death, do you still mind that kind of thing? Qin Shoutian pushed his glasses on the bridge of his nose and said, can you think of a safer place than Axiu's house? Indeed. If there is an absolutely safe place in this Yushui village, then it must be at Axiu's house. But are we forcibly moving in? Let's discuss with her. Qin Shoutian was also very distressed at the moment. She was also enthusiastic about us yesterday and may agree. However, rural people have conservative views. If we are not relatives or relatives, taking us in will inevitably provoke gossip. There's no other way. So Li Yin personally stepped forward and went to find Axiu. On the other hand, in the forest near the village, you're looking for death. Guling pushed the dark-skinned Iron Qin to the ground and cursed, why did Li Bing come for revenge? You don't think there are enough rumors of being haunted? But. Tai Qin trembled all over and said, have you forgotten? Uncle Haotian has always been disdainful of the idea of being haunted and even said that if there is a ghost, he really wants to see it. That's what he said a week ago. So what? How could there be ghosts? But. It's really strange. The Sun.in.law of the village head's family also died inexplicably. Although everyone didn't say it, their hearts were beating drums. And every time, something happened within a month of Li Bing's anniversary, which. It's too strange. Fuck you. Guling kicked her resentfully and said, you'll die if you don't say a few more words. Ghost. Where is the ghost? Li Bing, you have the guts to run out and scare me now. You don't have the guts, you don't. You. Guling couldn't continue halfway through her words. Because she could clearly see the Iron Qin lying on the ground, with its mouth wide open, and suddenly saw a gloomy white, disheveled face. Suddenly Guling picked up the iron piano and said, mouth. Open your mouth wider. Ling, what are you doing? Open your mouth, open it wide. At this point, the face was no longer visible. In Tai Qin's mouth, it looks very normal. However, Guling couldn't believe that the scene just now was an illusion because it was too clear. She opened her eyes wide and looked at Tai Qin's throat, almost pressing her face into Tai Qin's mouth. However, nothing was achieved. Guling immediately withdrew her body and looked at Tai Qin in terror. Gradually, she began to realize that something was wrong. There's so much water on your body. Iron Qin looked carefully and indeed, water poured out continuously from her body. Her clothes sucked in water and pressed tightly against her body. And what Guling saw next was a scene that made her both jagged and torn apart. After Qin's clothes pressed tightly against her body, she could clearly see. The clothes protruded a clear outline of her face. Guling immediately covered her face in fear, grabbed a stone on the ground, stepped forward and kicked down the Iron Qin, aimed at the contour of her face on the chest, and smashed it hard. And that stone happened to have a sharp end, which desperately pierced into the chest of the Iron Qin. And Tai Qin quickly tried to stop Guling, but Guling, who had lost her sanity, had an astonishing strength. With 2 or 3 hits, Tai Qin's chest was already flesh and blood blurred. I don't know how long it took, but she suddenly realized something and looked at Tai Qin's face. At this moment, she was completely devoid of blood, her originally dark skin turning extremely pale, and a large amount of blood gushed out of her mouth. She tore open the clothes of the iron piano, revealing her abdomen. At this moment, I can only see the wound I smashed. Where can I still see that face? Ghost. It's a ghost. She immediately dropped the stone in her hand, shrank all over and kept moving her body backwards, muttering to herself, "No, it's not me. Li Bing, it's not my business. You committed suicide. I scolded and hit you before, but I didn't kill you. It's not my fault, don't come to me, don't come." Immediately, she propped herself up and ran away like a gust of wind under her feet. "Sure, you can stay as long as you want." Axiu's answer surprised Li Yin and the others greatly. "Really? Okay." Li Yin asked again, "The four of us?" "Sure," Axiu said with a smile, "are you Mr. Journalist? As long as you report on Sister Binger's death and expose the sins of the village, it doesn't matter how long you stay." Surprisingly, I was still treated as a journalist. Li Yin thought to herself, do I just look like a paparazzi? Axiu's house is not very big, and it is indeed a bit crowded for 5 people. However, anyway, only 2 people need to sleep at night, and the other 2 are responsible for duty and vigilance. That's enough. Okay, let's go pack your luggage first. I really trouble you, Li Yin said repeatedly to Axiu, we will definitely pay the rent. Don't worry, we won't let you suffer. After Li Yin left, Axiu closed the door and locked the latch. Then, walk back into the kitchen of the room. Her kitchen is quite large, with a large water tank. Axiu walked up to the water cylinder, opened the cylinder head, and looked inside. A man's body was soaking in a water tank, and his face had turned even paler than paper. This man is the missing Yan Haotian. Uncle Haotian, I haven't forgotten how you treated Sister Binger back then. With your good social connections, you spread the news about Sister Binger around like a long-tongued woman. So, Axiu took out a pair of scissors, grabbed Yan Haotian's hair, grabbed his head out of the water, and then pried open his mouth. Then, I put the scissors into his mouth and surprisingly cut off his tongue. Sister Binger, don't worry. Xiu's pretty face showed a chilling cruelty. Just send them to me one by one, and I will handle them well. Then, she walked into the inner room of the room, opened a locked cabinet, took out a small bottle, and put her tongue inside. In the cabinet, there are also many bottles containing tongues. She closed the cabinet, locked it, and suddenly heard another loud sound of water coming from the kitchen. She quickly ran back to the kitchen and saw in the water tank, it's no longer Yan Haotian, but the iron Qin that was just killed by Guling. Axiu sneered and raised the sharp scissors in her hand again. End of this chapter. Chapter 7. Feast, 2. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 7 Feast, 2, You're moving to Axiu's house. Upon hearing Li Yin's words, village chief Zhang was completely stunned and quickly asked in a low voice, well, isn't my hospitality here adequate? Xiu's family is so small, Where, village chief, you treated us very well, but we wanted to experience the rural atmosphere. You treated us too well, but you didn't have the real feeling of being in the countryside. This is of course a lie that cannot even be said to be true to half a spoon. In fact, who can be fooled by this clumsy lie about experiencing rural customs? The village chief clearly stayed with them due to a misunderstanding, but now they can only make up for it. The village chief saw him persist and suddenly looked like he had a sudden realization, saying, oh, I see. What do you mean, I understand. However, Mr. Li, you must remember one thing, Zhang, the village chief, said to Li Yin with an unusually serious tone. Please remember it. Xiu, if you mention anything about ghosts or missing people in the village before, don't believe it. It's all her nonsense. Yes, there are indeed some people who mysteriously disappear within a month of Bing Air's anniversary, but that's just a coincidence, coincidentally. Nowadays, people all want to develop in the city. Many people feel that staying in the village for a lifetime has no future, especially young people who will go to the city to work and seek development. They always feel that the city is full of gold. As for why they all choose Bing Air's anniversary, I think they all want to attribute everything to the rumors of being haunted, so that the villagers don't know if they actually went to the city. Otherwise it would be troublesome if those nagging villagers find them in the city. This logic is very far-fetched, and Liin felt even more that the village chief seemed to be deliberately hiding something. Anyway, Mr. Li, please don't believe anything Axiu says, Zhang village chief said solemnly. Her relationship with Binger is too good, that's why she's like this. After leaving the village chief's house, Liin became increasingly certain that the village chief knew something but did not tell himself. And Axiu? Is Axiu also hiding something? When he arrived near Axiu's house, he suddenly noticed a young man wearing glasses walking towards Axiu's direction. When he noticed Liin and the others, he immediately frowned. Are you those 4 outsiders from the city? The young man wearing glasses was Liang Renbin, who said discontentedly, "What are you doing here?" After all, the village chief has greeted them, so for the sake of the village chief's face, he just has a relatively cold attitude. Luo Hengyan also recognized Liang Renbin. He saw this person this morning. When Axiu went to fight against Goling, Liang Renbin also went to pull her. I remember you. Luo Hengyan thought for a moment and said, "Are you called Renbin?" Liang Renbin, he replied coldly, "My father is the only doctor in the village and has a close relationship with the village head's family. I don't know what Zhang is thinking, but Ah Wu has mentioned it to me and he said you are definitely not good people. I advise you to leave early. Rumors like ghosts are all nonsense, so don't think about digging news." At this moment, he suddenly thought of something and quickly asked, "Wait. You all carry your luggage. Are you going to Axiu's house? Do you want to stay at her house?" "Yes," Liin replied. Liang Renbin suddenly became furious and forgot the village chief's warning completely. He roared, "What kind of person are you? You're going to live with Axiu. How dare you? What's your attitude?" Luo Hengyan was also angry. "What if we dare? Who are you, Axiu? Can you control it? She's my fiancée Ae." Liang Renbin walked over in 3 steps, grabbed Li Yin's collar, and said, "You get out of the village immediately. If you dare to step in again, I'll waste you. Doctor's son, should you also have some compassion?" Li Yin said calmly, "Mr. Liang, please let go. We will stay for a month and leave, so we won't cause any trouble for you." "Fuck you." Liang Renbin was furious and was about to punch him hard, but Li Yin grabbed his fist and said, "Mr. Liang, please don't force me." During this month, they couldn't even leave Yushui village for half a step. So, you must act tough. If the villagers unite to drive them away in the future, it will be troublesome. You. Liang Renbin was about to say something more when suddenly he saw the 2 people running behind Li Yin. He let go of his hand and shouted, "Ah Wu, Ah Yu." The visitors were Zhang Hongwu and Zhang Suyue from Zhang village chief's family. "What are you doing, Renbin?" Suyue saw Renbin about to take action against Li Yin just now and quickly stepped forward to dissuade him. "Well, this is not good, Renbin. We both grew up together with Axiu. Do you think I let these people of unknown origin live with Axiu's house? You know my feelings for Axiu." Suyue nodded and said, "I know, that's why I came here to take a look." Then she looked at Li Yin and said, "Mr. Li, Mr. Luo, Mr. Qin, and Miss Yi. Let's go. Look, the people in the village don't welcome you." "Who said that?" "I welcome them very much." A familiar voice came and everyone turned their gaze to the same person. Axiu. She looked coldly at Liang Renbin and said, "Liang Renbin, you have developed skills. Who is your fiancé Ae? Who are you going to depose?" "Ah." Ah Xiu, listen to me, these 4 people definitely have no good intentions. That's better than you. Axiu didn't even look at him directly and walked towards Li Yin, saying, Mr. Li, don't worry, you come with me. Unable to bear it anymore, Liang Renbin immediately grabbed Ah Xiu's hand and said, Ah Xiu. What exactly do you mean? That's what you mean. I'm not your fiancé AE, and I won't marry you either. I remember clearly how you treated Sister Binger. Then she turned her gaze to O and Suyue and said, you two are not good things either. Oh, you used to want to rape Sister Binger, right? Ah Wu's face turned pale and he angrily said, you. Don't spit blood out. I know. You tell Sister Binger that she is also a lowly seed born from her mother's red apricot tree, and there must be blood flowing from her bones. That time. You crushed her under the bushes and forced her to be violent. If it weren't for Zhang village chief passing by, Sister Binger. Oh immediately looked at the gaze cast by the people around him and quickly defended himself, she's talking nonsense. Don't believe her. Suyue, you believe in your brother, right? And you, Suyue. Axiu coldly pointed at her and said, although you didn't do anything directly to Sister Binger, you also played with her from childhood to adulthood. She had such a big incident, and you always stood idly by. When her mother passed away, you didn't come to comfort her either. Axiu, I. Suyue seemed to want to defend herself, but she couldn't say anything. Li Yin looked at this scene and thought to himself. Ah Xiu's feelings for Li Bing are really not ordinary, even an unforgettable emotion. Ah Wu, Liang Renbin also asked in surprise, aren't you capable of it? You really did that kind of thing? You're crazy. It's not me. Ah Wu persisted in his defense, do you believe what Ah Xiu said? She even said that Li Bing's ghost is still lingering and wants to seek revenge from us. Do you also believe it? I played with you naked from childhood until we grew up. I can't tell if what you said is true or false. Liang Renbin continued to ignore him and said to Ah Xiu. Okay, I know. In the future, no, there's no need. Isn't today Li Bing's birthday? I will go with you to pay my respects to her and apologize to her for what I did wrong, okay? Please don't do this. I really like you. Ah Xiu showed a strange smile and said, do you like me? Alright, then prove it to me. Proof. How to prove it? She pointed to the waterfall by the mountain in the distance and said, you, jump down from there. Oh, don't forget to cut off your tongue first. If you do that, I believe you really like me. When she said this, there was no hint of joking at all. And, my eyes have become filled with resentment and cruelty. This made Li Yin feel a chill in his heart. Ah Xiu. Liang Renbin was also scared by her gaze and said, you're not serious, are you? Don't you go jump. Then, just cut off your tongue. If you can't do it, don't say you like me. Ah Xiu's cold and resentful gaze made Li Yin, Luo Hengyan, and others shudder. At the same time, Guling rushed back home and the first thing she did was to firmly close the door. I killed. Guling leaned against the door, recalling the scene just now, still in shock. At this moment, the voice of her husband Song Tian came from the inner room. What's wrong? You lost your soul. She struggled to stand up and walked into the inner room, saying to her husband sitting in the room, hey. I said, let's go burn some paper money for Li Bing. Ah. Song Tian was taken aback and said, are you okay? Do you really think that Uncle Haotian is missing because he's haunted? I'm not at ease in my heart. She kept staring out the window from time to time. Don't think too much. Song Tian quickly helped her to the bed and sat down, saying, you were influenced by Ah Xiu, right? There were a few people missing, but not many. That is to say, the son-in-law of the village head's family died mysteriously, and surprisingly collapsed all over the water at the village head's doorstep. However, this cannot be said to be haunted. It's not all made up by Axiu. Actually, everyone is discussing whether Axiu killed those people. But I think it's impossible. How could a weak woman kill so many people? I don't know. I see. How incoherent you are. Forget it, don't think too much. There's something I was just thinking about, and I feel like it's related to those 4 outsiders from the city. What? Guling quickly asked after hearing this, what exactly is going on? About a month ago, someone brought a letter from the city to the village chief. This was quite rare. After reading the letter, the village chief's attitude became strange and he became even more hesitant about talking about ghosts, so no one dared to say anything in front of him. Delivery. How come I don't know? Of course you don't know, you haven't really cared about the village's affairs. I guess those 4 people might be related to that letter, right? Otherwise, why would the village chief invite them to stay at his house? It sounds very reasonable. Alright, don't think too much about it. Stay well, I'll go to a thatched cottage first, said Song Tian as he walked out. The thatched cottage was outside the room. After Song Tian opened the door, he went to the toilet inside, took off his pants, and squatted down. At this moment, suddenly, he could only feel a chill coming from his buttocks, and a huge sound of water could be heard. Before I had time to react, an extremely shocking scene appeared. What washes the toilet is not clear water, but crimson blood. And mixed with blood, there are also many fragments of corpses. Wow, Song Tian quickly picked up his pants and stood up, rushing towards the door of the thatched cottage. However, the door of the thatched cottage was actually locked. He immediately used his body to desperately collide, but no matter how hard he collided, there was no response. He immediately slammed the door and shouted desperately, "Ling, Ling. You spendthrift, open the door for me quickly. Open the door." At this moment, he accidentally turned his head back, and as a result, his whole body froze. A hand covered in blood, extending from under the urinal. Song Tian suddenly collapsed on the ground, wanting to say something, but he got stuck in his throat and couldn't say anything. Then, a head completely covered in thick and long hair slowly emerged from the toilet. End of this chapter. Chapter 8. Feast, 3. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 8 Feast, 3. Just as Song Tian was already scared to the point of splitting his liver and gallbladder, a knocking sound suddenly sounded outside the door, followed by Guling's voice. "What's your name?" "You're dead." The sound immediately sounded like a heavenly melody in Song Tian's ear, and he turned around and shouted, "Ah, Ling, open it quickly, there is." "There is." Immediately, he turned his gaze back to the toilet. But it was already empty. I want to know what the term haunted really means. Li Yin simply took on the role of a journalist, while Qin Shaotian also took out his journalist ID, which further convinced Axiu. Immediately, Li Yin spread a piece of paper on a table of 8 immortals in the outer hall of Axiu's house and took out a pen, asking, "Miss Axiu. The next question we need to ask is very important. I hope you can answer truthfully." Li Yin is very certain that everything will not be as simple as it appears on the surface. That apartment wouldn't be assigned a mission that posed no threat to their lives, let alone the 4th blood letter instruction for him. The ghosts in that school last time were completely indiscriminate killings. But this time, it seems to be a clearly vengeful supernatural event. So, she has no reason to take action against herself. The difficulty is actually lower than the 3rd blood character indication. This is impossible. So Li Yin is very certain that they must have overlooked something. And the things overlooked are absolutely fatal. That apartment couldn't have left them with a dead end to survive. Li Yin, who has lived in that apartment for a year, is deeply aware of this. Axiu sat opposite Li Yin at this moment, smiled lightly, and said, "Journalist, then you must write down all my words and publish them." "Yes, definitely." "Okay. I'll tell you." Axiu began to recount what happened after Binger's death. Li Bing's death did cause a stir for the village. Although everyone used to underestimate Li Bing, life was at stake and there was a long period of turmoil afterwards. And Axiu, who had a deep affection for Li Bing, was in excruciating pain. Since then, Axiu has been living a life of walking corpses and has no mood to farm. He hasn't had a good meal for several months, and in the end, he has only lost skin and bones. Those days were really painful. And there are two people who always come to visit her and bring some food over. Those two people are Liang Renbin and Zhang Suyue. In the past, besides Binger, the relationship between Axiu and Suyue was the best. Although she is the granddaughter of the village head's family, she is usually very approachable and hardworking as a rural girl. However, her personality is too weak and lacks independence. So, that's why there was a herd mentality when Bing Er's incident happened. Although she sympathized with Binger, she dared not speak for her. The old friendship has completely broken down. At this moment, Xiu's gaze toward Suyue was filled with hatred. About a year later, on the evening of June 6 of that year, Suyue came to see Axiu again. Although she couldn't talk for a few words and fell into embarrassment, she repeatedly reminded Axiu to take care of her health. After she left, Axiu still couldn't fall asleep. Although it was getting late, she was not tired at all. Tomorrow is Bing Er's anniversary. After the death of her parents, Bing Er was the only irreplaceable relative for Axiu. From childhood to adulthood, Bing Er has always guarded herself, caring and loving like a sister at every moment. She couldn't let go of Bing Er's death. And that night she suddenly heard a strange sound coming from the water tank in the kitchen. Axiu was initially startled, but she slowly walked into the kitchen and moved towards the water tank. At this point, Yi Kursin, who was listening on the side, shuddered and couldn't help but look towards the kitchen. "Don't be afraid, Miss Yi," Axiu smiled and said, "Sister Binger, she won't hurt you." Then she continued speaking. At that time, she didn't know where the courage came from and opened the water tank. And what appeared in the water tank was actually the body of Suyue's father, the son-in-law of the village chief's family. At first, Axiu was extremely panicked, but then she noticed. Surrounding the waist of the village chief's son-in-law's corpse are a pair of fair and slender arms. And when Axiu noticed the arms, he immediately retracted behind the body. Axiu was about to retrieve the body from the vat. As she spoke, Kursin looked at Axiu's face with a hint of fear, but the owner of those fair arms could never be found. But Axiu understood. It's Bing Er. Sister Bing Er killed this man, and Suyue was also warned by him to sever ties with Bing Er and never be too intimate with her. Because of him, even Suyue became indifferent to Sister Bing Er. Do you know what I did later? Axiu's face turned into a pitiful smile at the moment. I cut off his tongue. Because they talked too much. Then, I moved his body to the door of the village chief's house. Upon hearing this, Qin Shoutian pushed his glasses and spoke steadily, "Miss Axiu. How could you tell us such a thing? Aren't you reporters? Then let's export the intelligence about these things." Axiu's face smiled even more, as if he was talking about ordinary daily topics. "Well, my words don't matter. After Sister Binger's death, I will live or die, and I don't mind long ago." The village chief's son-in-law's tongue was cut off. But this thing. The people of the village chief's family didn't say anything. They probably thought of something, right? Some people have doubted me, but so what? Anyway, my relationship with the people in the village has been like water and fire for a long time. Even Liang Renbin keeps pestering me, but I always hope that one day his body will appear in my water tank. All the missing people in the village appeared in the water tank. What did you do with the bodies later? Just cut off your tongue. After doing this, the original body will disappear, and then a new body will appear. Li Yin recorded everything and then forcibly remained calm, saying, "Thank you, Miss Axiu. Your information is very precious. This woman is clearly abnormal." Her paranoid feelings towards Binger led her to engage in such incredible behavior. At this moment, Qin Shoutian asked Li Yin with his gaze, and the meaning was very clear. How much can this woman's words be trusted? Li Yin answered him with his gaze. Basically credible. If it were in the past, Li Yin would definitely have thought that Axiu had serious delusions, but now he believes that this is actually closer to reality. Water tank. Corpse. Broken tongue. Axiu. Binger Li Yin felt that all of this seemed to conceal a key point they had overlooked. What exactly is it? Bing Er's vengeful soul has never dispersed. 1 month after the annual festival, she carries out a killing spree and delivers her body to Axiu's house. Thinking about it makes people feel creepy. Is moving to Axiu's house really the right decision? Do you think? Li Yin lowered her voice and asked, how many more people will she kill? Well, probably, these 5 people, Tai Qin, Ren Bin, Gu Ling, Hong Wu, and Su Yu, will definitely die. Li Yin asked another question. A problem that he is extremely concerned about. Can you communicate with Bing Er's soul? Axiu shook her head and said, no way. If possible, I really hope to communicate more with my sister. Aren't you afraid? Afraid? Why be afraid? Axiu still maintained a smiling expression, but it was even more terrifying. Yi Kursen finally couldn't help but say, Miss Axiu. You shouldn't have done that. You. Li Yin quickly signaled to Yi Kursen not to continue, but it was already too late. Axiu glared coldly at her and said, what? Aren't those people supposed to die? They forced Sister Binger to die. Aren't they? Aren't they? You. What you said. Yi Kursen dared not say anything more. That night, the disappearance of Tai Qin also plunged the village into great panic once again. At this moment, it can be said that everyone is in danger. The rural areas, which used to stay indoors all night, keep their doors locked tightly at night and travel together. What will happen in the next month's days? Night. Li Yin and Qin Shoutian sat in the hall, listening to the faint snoring coming from the inner room, and began discussing the next steps of the plan. Something's wrong. Qin Shoutian didn't execute the blood word instruction for the first time. He didn't believe everything was just that simple. Li Yin took out a flashlight and pointed it at the piece of paper, analyzing Qin Shoutian, saying, that water tank seems to be the main medium through which Bing Er and Axiu communicate. Every time, the bodies of the people she killed are sent, but they all disappear later, except for the bodies of the village chief's son. In law. From various situations, Bing Er and Axiu have deep feelings and connections. So, if we treat Axiu well, she has no reason to take action against us. On the surface. Isn't. Right. It's too strange. The people in the village do have suspicions of Axiu's murder, but it seems that they are more receptive to the idea of being haunted. Judging from their hostility towards reporters and their initial words. This incident seems to have caused a lot of trouble. They keep denying the idea of being haunted, but I feel that they cannot completely rule it out. Li Yin. What do you mean? Among the living now, there may be people who have seen the dead Binger, which is why the rumor of being haunted has spread. After all, it is more reasonable to think that Axiu killed them. The village chief cares about us and repeatedly reminds me that Axiu's words are all lies. Why does he care so much about whether I believe Axiu's words? Do we think that this village is haunted, and what does it mean to the village chief? Well, Qin Shoutian was also puzzled by this question. The village chief is indeed unusually attentive to us. Xia Yuan told me that starting from the fourth instruction, everything will become increasingly eerie and abnormal. However, this matter is a very simple revenge of the undead, and the clues are too clear. Although it is indeed very eerie in reality, compared to my previous 3 blood instructions, it is not particularly eerie. Indeed. Qin Shoutian also remembers some of his past experiences, many of which are still incomprehensible to this day. Is it that simple for Bing Er to commit suicide and become a ghost, and then seek revenge against those who excluded and insulted her during her lifetime? Li Yin pointed to several key points on the paper with a pen and said, "I noticed something." What? Water. Water. The appearance of Bing Er is all related to water. When I first entered the village, I found the ghost's face in the bucket held by Axiu. Bing Er died in the water, and she put the body into the water tank and handed it over to Axiu. All of this is closely related to water. Yes. Indeed. Perhaps she can only rely on water to act. No, it shouldn't be that simple. However, water is definitely a signal that cannot be ignored. I got it. And at the same time, there is another person who cannot sleep. That is Suyue. She lay alone in bed, tossing and turning, unable to sleep. Finally, she woke up alone and decided to take a walk by the fish pond outside. Tonight, without the moon, this village is naturally shrouded in darkness. Strolling by the edge of the fish pond, Suyue constantly recalls the cheerful and lively ice in her heart. So, slowly squatting down, scooping up water. Bing Er. Without realizing it, her face was already covered in tears. "I'm sorry. I'm sorry." At that moment, she suddenly felt a chill. Looking down at the pitch-black fish pond, she vaguely felt an unclear outline inside. What is that? Immediately, she suddenly heard footsteps coming from behind. She turned around and saw a figure slowly walking over in the darkness. Who are you? Suyue also felt scared at the moment, but still spoke up and asked. The other party did not answer. The body of the dark figure, as it approached, twisted very badly, as if there were no bones in it. Suyue stood up immediately and wanted to escape. But it's too late. That dark shadow appeared in front of her at some point. But it was too dark, she couldn't see the other person's face clearly. At this moment, the sound of water came from the fish pond behind, as if something had rushed out. The shadow in front of me reached out and grabbed Suyue's neck. Suyue only felt that her hand was completely soaked in water. Bing Er. At this moment, she only felt that her life was about to be pulled out of her body. She did indeed come back. Before death, suddenly a moonlight shone down. What caught Suyu's eye was Bing Er's completely cold and pale face. End of this chapter. Chapter 9. Feast, 4. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 9 Feast, 4. Suyue suddenly opened her eyes in this moment. At this moment, she is still lying in bed and has never gone out. Nightmares. The scene just now was just a nightmare. However, when her hands touched her neck, she found that it was actually filled with water. Next. Her gaze turned to the bedroom door in front of her. She clearly closed the door. Tick, 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 drops of water drip onto the floor. A pair of bare feet were slowly walking on the floor. Moonlight shone into the window, and in front of Suyu, a woman with a pale and dripping body walked past the door in front of her. Ah! Ah! Suyue opened her mouth wide and could only make some meaningless sounds as she watched the scene unfold in front of her. She stood in bed like this for a long time, finally daring to get up, her pupils constantly contracting and expanding, so frightened that she couldn't speak at all. She slowly stood up and moved towards the door. However, every step feels as heavy as 1,000 pounds. After leaving the door, there was no one. But on the floor, there were rows of water stains left, proving that everything just now was not a dream. Suyue felt as if she was all in an ice cellar. She lifted her feet and continued walking forward, her bare feet stepping on the water, incredibly cold. And immediately, water began to seep out from the ceiling and walls. The amount of water is increasing. Suyue walked to the door of her brother's room. At this point, the ground has started to accumulate water. The entrance of my brother's room in front of me was also constantly leaking water. Suyue reached out her hand and gently pushed open the door. My brother is still lying well in bed, and his room is also leaking water everywhere. Strangely, Ah Wu slept soundly and showed no signs of waking up. Brother! Brother, hurry, run away! Suyue exerted all her strength before saying these words, but she quickly couldn't continue. At this moment, the quilt on my brother's chest surprisingly bulged up strangely. Immediately, the raised part gradually moved upwards. Stop, Bing! Bing! Suyue said, but she didn't dare to take a step. Suddenly, the blanket suddenly bulged up, and two fair hands suddenly reached out to Ah Wu. No. Suyue opened her eyes again. She is still lying in bed. There are no signs of standing water on the ground. The moon outside the window is still shrouded in a dark cloud. Is it another nightmare? How can one still wake up from a nightmare? At this moment, a black figure suddenly appeared at the door, and Suyue almost screamed. However, a familiar voice came. Suyue, what's wrong? It turned out to be her mother Zhang Yinglan. Mom! Suyue burst into tears and threw herself into her mother's arms, saying, I'm so scared. I'm so scared. What are you afraid of, child? I had a dream. Binger, Binger, she's back and she's going to kill her brother. Suyue's mother, Zhang Yinglan, smiled and said, What are you saying? That's impossible. Binger is dead, how could she come back? But Dad. And Uncle Haotian and the others. Your father's death. It's not a ghost. Don't listen to the villagers' nonsense. Sigh, poor child, you've thought too much. You've thought too much. Mom. Can you sleep with me? Ah. No, it's such a big person. Why do you still sleep with me? Please. Mom. You child, Zhang Yinglan said, all right then, I'll go get the blanket. After her mother left, Suyue finally breathed a sigh of relief. But after a while, she suddenly thought of something. Mother. These days, my mother has been playing mahjong all night at Aunt Wang's house in the village, and even sleeping there. She didn't even come home today. And at that moment, a black figure reappeared at the door. Ah! Suyue suddenly sat up again from the bed. It's another nightmare. Suyue was panting heavily in bed, constantly looking left and right. Is this reality? Or a nightmare? She didn't dare to sleep anymore and immediately sat up, put on her clothes, rolled up the blanket, and walked out of the room. Then, I groped to go to my brother's room and decided to sleep with him tonight. The repeated nightmares have made Suyue unable to endure them anymore. Finally arriving at her brother's door, Suyue calmed down and pushed open the door. My brother is still sleeping soundly in bed. She tiptoed over and shook Ah Wu, who was sleeping soundly on the bed, saying softly, Brother. Brother. Wake up, I am Suyu. But Ah Wu seemed to be sleeping soundly, not moving at all. Suyue couldn't shake him up, so she lay directly next to him. Anyway, the bed was relatively large, compact with her brother, and then closed her eyes. Sleeping together, I finally feel a lot more at ease. Then, without realizing it, she fell asleep again. Suddenly, in a hazy moment, she felt someone pushing her and saying, "Suyue, wake up, wake up. It's my brother's voice. Brother. Let me sleep a little longer. Wake up, Suyue." Suyue rubbed her eyes drowsily and then opened them. "My brother is watching her in front of her. But why is my brother's eyeballs protruding and bleeding? Also, why is his face completely pale and devoid of blood?" Suyue suddenly woke up. She opened her eyes wide open. That disheveled woman was pinching her brother's head and looking at her with a sly smile. Suyue immediately closed her eyes, and when she opened them again, she was still sleeping in her own bed. It's still a nightmare. It seems to be forever reincarnating without stopping. She has no idea now whether she is in her dream or in reality. Is everything just now real or a dream? Can she never wake up again? At the thought of this possibility, she felt cold all over. She gritted her teeth, got out of bed, went outside, and touched the kitchen. Then, she took a black sharp knife. Then, she sat in the kitchen with the knife, intending to stay up all night like this. Anyway, she doesn't want to fall asleep anymore. I hope this moment is in reality. Time passes by little. Suddenly, she saw a black shadow appearing at the kitchen door. And that dark figure, although unable to see her face clearly, was indeed a disheveled woman. Without hesitation, she rushed forward with one swift step and stabbed the dark figure's chest with a knife. The black figure immediately grabbed her face with both hands, but Suyue didn't care, throwing the black figure to the ground with a knife. A knife stabbing down. Go to hell. Go to hell. You go to hell, go to hell. Although Suyue didn't move at the dark shadow, she continued to stab just as she had stabbed almost 100 times. Suddenly, tick, tick, this kind of voice is once again coming to her ears. Suyue opened her eyes again and woke up from her nightmare. How many more repetitions do we need? Suyue is really going crazy at this moment. What should I do to wake up from a nightmare? What exactly should we do? Is it all Bing Er's vengeful soul who comes to claim her life? But what did I do to her? Is it just sitting idly by and not letting herself go? Do you want to torture yourself just for this? Suyue gritted her teeth and once again lifted the blanket. She wants to see how heavy this nightmare really is. Barefoot, she swayed around various parts of the house, but there was nothing unusual about it. Suddenly, she heard footsteps. Although it was mild, she clearly felt someone walking past behind her. She immediately turned her head and followed closely. Then, she walked to the kitchen door again. There is indeed a dark figure in the kitchen. And at the moment that the dark figure saw him, he suddenly picked up a knife in his hand and stabbed himself. In a moment of slight shock, she had already been crushed to the ground by the black shadow, and then the black shadow raised a sharp knife. This time, the nightmare won't wake up again. End of this chapter. Chapter 10. Ghost Water. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 10. Ghost Water. When Luo Hengyan opened his eyes again, he suddenly realized that he was actually in a forest. How could it be? I'm lying in bed. Then, a dangerous signal came to mind. Do you mean? He immediately stood up with his body supported, and the dense forest was filled with boundless darkness, as if a monster would appear from that darkness at any moment. For a moment, he felt extremely cold, but he didn't dare to move. After all, his stay in the apartment was too short and he had almost no experience. At this moment, I don't even know how to deal with it. But he didn't understand why he found himself. There's no reason. At that moment, suddenly he heard a voice from behind. You. Aren't you that city person? Looking back, it turned out to be Liang Renbin speaking. Not only him, but also Song Tian, Gu Ling, and Hongwu followed behind him. You. Hengyan immediately understood and said, shouldn't you also? After waking up, I was inexplicably here. Hongwu looked around and said, is it possible that you guys were the one behind it? What nonsense. Heng Yan didn't have the intention to argue with him now, but Song Tian and Go Ling appeared particularly scared. The most calm person is actually Liang Renbin. He said calmly, let's walk back. This is also very close to the village. Everyone has just calmed down and taken steps forward. Anyway, it's not far from the village. On the other hand, Luo Hengyan was very nervous, occasionally looking at his own shadow and worrying about changes. Fortunately, the shadow has always been normal, and it seems that this place still falls within the jurisdiction of Yushui village as stipulated by the apartment regulations. Renbin. Suddenly, Song Tian shouted, Axiu. Has Axiu undergone any strange changes recently? What do you mean? Liang Renbin asked inexplicably, what are you saying? Me, I. Recalling that terrifying experience, Song Tian still trembled all over, but he still mustered the courage to ask, is Axiu doing something? He has recently begun to doubt whether Axiu may have drugged them. Or, is it the so-called head-bowing master in legend? Only in this way can we explain the supernatural phenomena that occur in ourselves. What are you talking nonsense? Liang Renbin angrily said, what do you think Axiu has done? May she know some kind of magic? It always feels strange. I suspect she might know how to summon ghosts, otherwise, how could it be so coincidental? Every time she curses us on Li Bing's birthday, it always comes true. Look, Uncle Haotian and Na Qin have both disappeared. Shut up. Liang Renbin erupted in anger and rushed forward, ready to take action. He was quickly stopped by Ah Wu and said, Renbin. What are you doing? I also think she's abnormal. Go Ling quickly helped out, she's always so lifeless. She's always thinking about how to retaliate against us, and for the sake of Li Bing, she might be able to do anything. Yes, haven't you heard of any decapitation masters? Maybe she's this kind of person. Or maybe it's just hiring a pen fairy or something like that. Luo Hengyan felt a headache as he listened to them arguing about these things on the side. Head-bowing master. Of course not. Xia Yuan mentioned to them that the blood instructions given by the apartment are absolutely a pure supernatural curse phenomenon, and there can be no human factor involved. Axiu, it is absolutely impossible to play such a role in this. However, there is no way to say this to them. Luo Hengyan now only wants to return to Axiu's house as soon as possible. After all, staying in this dark and humid forest, who knows what will happen next. When he suddenly recalled that Li Yin had warned him that water was a crucial element. The grassland on this ground is indeed quite humid, and Luo Hengyan became alert. As time passed, he felt a gust of Yin wind and immediately said, stop making noise. Still, let's go quickly. Those people will no longer argue. Luo Hengyan suddenly feels a bit strange. What's going on? He feels like there's something very unnatural about it. But I can't say for a moment where that unnatural place is. They continued walking, and Luo Hengyan was also trembling with fear of what might happen around him at any moment. And at this moment Renbin. Axiu. Has Axiu undergone any strange changes recently? Luo Hengyan was surprised. Why? Did he ask this question again? But the person asking the question was no longer Song Tian, but Go Ling. Even more strangely, Liang Renbin seemed to have no recollection of being asked this question just now. Instead, he asked in confusion, just like before, what do you mean? What are you saying? Then Go Ling replied, is Axiu doing something? Suddenly, Liang Renbin became angry again and said, what are you talking nonsense about? What do you think Axiu has done? This conversation is exactly the same as before. Only Song Tian's words were changed to Go Ling's words. Luo Hengyan immediately interrupted her. Why did you say the same thing? However, Guling ignored him and continued, Can she know any magic? It always feels strange. I suspect she might know how to summon ghosts, otherwise, how could it be so coincidental? Every time she curses us on Li Bing's birthday, it always comes true. Look, Uncle Haotian and Ah Qin have both disappeared. Shut up. I think she's abnormal. Guling said what she just said this time. She's always so lifeless. She's always thinking about how to retaliate against us, and for the sake of Li Bing, she might be able to do anything. Yes, haven't you heard of any decapitation masters? Maybe she's this kind of person. Or maybe it's just hiring a pen fairy or something like that. It was like a video replay, and Liang Renbin rushed forward. Ah Wu stopped him. Enough. Luo Hengyan stopped them and said, Are you crazy? Why do you repeat the same words as before? What's wrong with you? Everyone looked at Luo Hengyan like they were looking at aliens, and Ah Wu stared at him and said, What do you mean? You've become so strange. Luo Hengyan said, Have you been possessed by evil? What's going on? As Xia Yuan said. The further back, the more eerie the blood character indication becomes. The more difficult it is to understand, beyond human common sense. And he also said that if you encounter such a situation, don't be nervous first, and find a way to find the patterns of the strange phenomenon. But at this moment, Luo Hengyan was completely out of control. After all, his mind was not as good as Li Yin and Qin Shaotian, and he couldn't compare with Xia Yuan. At this moment, he only felt that the person in front of him was possessed by evil. Immediately, he ignored them and turned his head and ran away. Quickly, he gradually realized. As if he had been spinning in place, the surrounding scenery had hardly changed. But the forest was already full of trees and grass, so he didn't notice it at first. But now it seems very eerie. At this moment, footsteps rang from behind. Luo Hengyan turned around and saw that it was them again. And that strange phenomenon happened again. Renbin. The person who asked this question turned into Ah Wu. Ah Xiu. Has Ah Xiu undergone any strange changes recently? At this moment, Luo Hengyan felt that unnatural place becoming stronger and stronger. What do you mean? What are you saying? Renbin still had that puzzled expression, not at all like he had already been asked twice just now. And Ah Wu continued to speak strangely, saying what Song Tian and Guling had just said. Is Ah Xiu doing something? What are you talking nonsense about? What do you think Ah Xiu has done? May she know some kind of magic? It always feels strange. I suspect she might know how to summon ghosts, otherwise, how could it be so coincidental? Every time she curses us on Li Bing's birthday, it always comes true. Look, Uncle Haotian and Ah Qin have both disappeared. Shut up. I think she's abnormal. She's always so lifeless. She's always thinking about how to retaliate against us, and for Li Bing's sake, she probably can do nothing. Yes, haven't you heard of any decapitation masters? Maybe she's this kind of person. Or maybe it's just hiring a pen fairy or something like that. Exactly the same. Ah Wu feels like he's possessed by Song Tian and Guling at this moment. And Liang Renbin was once again angry in his heart, charging forward with one swift step and punching Ah Wu. This punch was so heavy that Ah Wu was knocked to the ground and even had nosebleeds. Just now, it was Ah Wu who stopped Liang Renbin, but now, it's him who got beaten up. Then Liang Renbin rode Ah Wu under him and punched him in the face one after another. Stop. Stop. Luo Hengyan wanted to step up and stop, but his feet seemed to have been filled with lead. Stop it, everything in front of him was like a dark spiral, and he felt as if his body was also drawn into this spiral. At this time, Li Yin and Qin Shaotian, who discovered that Hengyan was missing, went to various parts of the village to search for him. Hengyan. Luo Hengyan. Li Yin kept shouting his name, hoping he could hear it. However, no matter how you search, there is no trace. At that moment, he suddenly felt someone approaching behind him and quickly turned his head. At the entrance, it was Axiu. Ah. Axiu, you. Who are you looking for? Axiu said with a smile, Mr. Luo, it's gone. Yes, yes. Li Yin nodded and said, he used to sleep in the outer room, but now. There won't be anything wrong. I think Mr. Luo probably went for a walk somewhere. Axiu didn't show any signs of worry and still had a lively and cheerful expression. And this made Li Yin feel chilly. After all, what's wrong, Mr. Li Yin? Axiu walked towards him step by step, while Li Yin unconsciously retreated. You. Li Yin asked solemnly, who the hell are you? Human beings will not intervene in supernatural terror phenomena, as Xia Yuan once said. Li Yin had no doubt about this. But is Axiu really a human? Is there any evidence to suggest that she is a human? However, Axiu answered with a different answer. This village, this secluded water village, was developed by relying on the excellent mountain terrain and water source of Heiwu Mountain. Even in this big mountain, we can still live a life of self-reliance. My parents, as well as Binger's parents, have always been committed to the cultivation and construction of this village. Do you know? Mr. Li Yin, it was really hard at first to build such a village. As soon as I was born, I had to dig soil, fetch water, and wake up before dawn every day. For me, this mountain and this water are indelible memories. Although it is very hard, it is the most beautiful and precious memory for me and Sister Binger. As farmers, we deeply believe that as long as we work hard, we can definitely achieve happiness. Miss Axiu. But now, I sincerely hope that this village will be destroyed. Any hard-working person will definitely obtain happiness. It's all fake. Even though Sister Binger and her mother have put in so much effort for the construction of this village, just because of their self-righteous values, ignoring their pain, they have thrown her into the abyss of hell, even willing to force her to death. Don't, stop talking. Miss Axiu. Even if it turns into a ghost, what would happen? Xiu's face suddenly became extremely fierce, and her tone became increasingly fierce. Even if Sister Binger turns into a fierce ghost, she is more beautiful than those so-called people. No, it's not like this. Li Yin's forehead kept oozing sweat as he continued to retreat. You don't even know. You don't understand anything, real hell. Do you know what real hell is like? Real. Terrifying. Luo Hengyan walked in the dark woods. And Liang Renbin walked in front of him. Renbin. As soon as he spoke, Luo Hengyan felt extremely strange. However, he continued expressionlessly, Axiu. Has Axiu undergone any strange changes recently? This time. It turned out to be him. Turns out. I couldn't make my own choice, so I couldn't help but say these words. After uttering the words, head-bending master, and pen fairy, Liang Renbin turned his head and his eyes became extremely vicious. Immediately, he rushed forward and knocked down Luo Hengyan, waving his fists and hitting him. Luo Hengyan suddenly realized that something was making him feel unnatural because repeating that conversation every time in a cycle 1 out of 5 of them will inexplicably disappear. So the first person to speak was Song Tian. After he disappeared, he became Goling, and after she disappeared, she became Ah Wu, and now, Ah Wu has also disappeared. But, including himself, it just feels unnatural. Where have they all disappeared? Quickly, he came up with the answer. In front of him, it was no longer Liang Renbin who hit him, but a huge white-clad woman with a body several meters high. And the woman opened her mouth, which actually extended to over 2 meters. In her mouth. Surprisingly, there was a large amount of water accumulating. And Song Tian, Gu Ling, Ah Wu, and Liang Renbin, all four of them are struggling desperately in that water. The huge woman's mouth is constantly approaching Luo Hengyan. I feel a bit dizzy today, so I just finished one shift. Sorry, end of this chapter.